Dear friends, today's story will be about the legend of Charlie Charlie. Are you there? The night was dark and silent when my friends and I arrived at the abandoned house. The wind was cold and the dry leaves rustled on the ground, making a soft sound that contrasted with the anticipation we felt. It was a perfect night for a challenge, and Jake was especially excited. Come on, Sarah. You're not going to tell me you're scared to play Charlie. Charlie, are you? He laughed, teasing me as always. Jake had this way of making light of even the most tense situations. I looked at him, trying not to let my nervousness show. I'm not scared, Jake. I just think it's a load of nonsense. A game that's nothing more than an urban legend, I replied, trying to maintain my position as the skeptic of the group. But at the same time, there was a little voice inside me that whispered that maybe, just maybe, we should have chosen a different location. Emily, on the other hand, was beaming. I could see in her eyes that she was fully immersed in the idea that the paranormal was real. But what if there really is something there? I feel like this house has a different energy. Let's do it, she said with a glint in her eye that made me a little uneasy. Mark was quiet, which was no surprise. He had always been the most fearful of the group. I don't think we should do this. What if something happens? These things are no joke. He was visibly nervous, his hands shaking slightly. Oh, come on. You're just scared because you don't want to be called a wimp again, Jake replied, laughing as we began to settle down on the floor in a dusty room. Let's draw the board. It'll be fun. I'm not sure exactly how we got carried away, but soon we were sitting in a circle, the makeshift board drawn on a piece of paper. I was still trying to convince myself that it was just a game, but the atmosphere was charged. I could feel the tension in the air as if something was lurking. Charlie, are you here? Jake asked with a mischievous smile. His voice reverberated through the empty room, and I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. The silence that followed seemed endless. Emily's eyes were closed, focused, while Mark looked around restlessly. If you're here, answer, Jake insisted, and then, as if in response to him, the tip of the pencil began to move. The atmosphere changed instantly. The laughter that had been present before turned into palpable nervousness. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This can't be happening, I muttered, unsure whether to be more scared or fascinated. Emily opened her eyes, and I could see a bright light in them. He answered, He's here. Mark, already on the verge of collapse, shook his head. This is crazy. Let's stop. Oh, come on, Mark. You're not going to get scared now, are you? Jake teased, but there was something in his voice that didn't sound so playful. The atmosphere was shifting, and I could feel the tension rising. Let's just do one more round, and then we'll stop, Emily suggested, a little hesitant. Just one more, I promise. I don't know. I hesitated, but Jake's teasing made me reconsider. Okay, just one more. Then, before I could understand what was happening, I heard a noise coming from one of the doors at the back of the house. It was the sound of wood creaking, and to our surprise, the door closed on its own, making all of us jump in shock. It was just the wind, I tried to convince myself, but I couldn't hide the tremble in my voice. Mark's expression was pure panic, and he started to stand up. I don't want to play anymore. This isn't right. Stop being a coward, Mark. You're not going to leave now, are you? Jake mocked, but I could see he was starting to get nervous too. The atmosphere was heavy, and I knew this wasn't just a game. Something's wrong here, I murmured, but Jake was already preparing to ask Charlie another question, while Mark stared at the door, his expression growing more desperate. What had started as a simple game was turning into something much darker than any of us expected. The pressure in the room was palpable, like the air was charged with electricity. The feeling of unease was growing with each passing moment, and Jake's nervous laughter echoed off the peeling walls of the abandoned house. I looked at each of them. Emily was pale, her eyes wide, while Mark, leaning against the wall, looked like he was about to faint. I knew we had crossed a line, and Charlie wasn't just a game. He was here, with us. Let's ask Charlie more questions, I suggested, trying to hide my own nervousness. The idea that he knew our secrets made me uneasy. This wasn't just an urban legend. We were dealing with something real. But Jake was excited. Come on, Sarah. Let's ask who's going to win the next football game. He laughed, but it sounded off, like he was trying to convince himself that everything was fine. Emily frowned, her gaze distant. No, this isn't a good idea. I feel a presence. Something's not right. Mark, visibly shaken, shook his head. Let's stop. This is crazy. We shouldn't have started this. Don't be a coward, Mark. It's just a game, Jake sneered, but there was a defiant glint in his eyes. I don't want to play with this anymore, Mark insisted, his voice trembling as he looked toward the door like he was already planning his escape. Then let's ask one more question, and if we get more scared, we'll stop. How about that? I proposed, trying to stay calm. Mark's fear was contagious, and I didn't want him to feel more anxious than he already was. Okay, just one more time, he said, defeated, still casting nervous glances at the door. Jake and I moved closer to the board. With a gesture, he made the pointer move. Charlie, are you here? The silence that followed felt deep and oppressive. The pointer started moving slowly, and my heart raced. Yes, the board responded, and a wave of chills ran down my spine. What was happening? What's Sarah's secret? Jake asked with a teasing smile. The pointer slid, stopping at yes, before quickly moving to 5. I wondered if he was joking, but the expression on his face showed he wasn't. What did it mean? Charlie, what do you mean by that? I frowned, trying to keep my voice steady. The pointer moved again, and this time it stopped at death. The air grew cold, and I could feel the tension building. Emily took a step back, and Mark was pale as a ghost. That can't be true, Mark shouted. Let's stop now. He turned toward the door, but to his horror, it was locked. What do you mean by this? I screamed, now truly terrified. I said I didn't want to do this anymore. Mark was desperate, pounding on the door. Let me out, please. But Jake was caught up in his obsession. One more question. Charlie, who's going to die? He was so engrossed he didn't realize the gravity of what he was asking. The lights began flickering, and the room seemed to shrink around us. Jake, no, I shouted, but it was too late. The board lit up, and a low, dark laugh echoed through the house. Charlie doesn't want us to stop, Emily whispered, her voice now taking on a tone I had never heard before. He's here, and he's not going to let us go. Mark, in his panic, seemed to grow weaker with each passing moment, and I wondered if he could endure this. I looked at each of our faces and realized we were trapped in a cycle we couldn't escape. Jake, this isn't a game anymore, I said, trying to pull him back to reality. We need to stop now. But he wasn't listening. The lights flickered again, and the sense that something was closing in around us grew stronger. The heavy presence seemed to surround our bodies, and I knew things were about to get worse. Charlie, go away, I screamed, but my voice felt small and powerless in the face of what was about to happen. The atmosphere was thick with tension, almost tangible. As the voice that whispered Mark's name echoed in my mind, my eyes locked onto him. His pale face and wide eyes reflected a terror I had never seen before. He was desperately trying to open the door, his fingers trembling as they gripped the handle that refused to budge. Mark, are you okay? I asked, but he didn't respond. The sound of his heavy breathing mixed with the oppressive silence of the house. I can't get out. The door's locked, he shouted, his voice thick with anguish. I looked at Jake and Emily, who seemed so absorbed in the game that they didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. Aren't you listening? He needs help, I demanded, but the feeling of helplessness began to consume me. The Charlie board was in the middle of us, and the energy around it pulsed like a malevolent heart. Charlie, are you here? Jake asked, laughing nervously, as if his bravado could ward off the panic creeping in. The board's response was almost immediate, the pointer moving with a speed that froze me in place. Yes, said the voice that echoed in my mind, and I saw Jake's expression change, the laughter vanishing from his lips. This isn't right. We need to stop, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark's in trouble. Don't be such a coward, Sarah. It's just a game, Jake retorted, but there was no laughter left in his voice. The atmosphere had shifted, and the house seemed to close in on us, shadows stretching as if they wanted to swallow us whole. Charlie doesn't want us to stop, Emily said, her voice low but filled with an unsettling certainty. He wants more. More from us. The fear radiating from her was palpable, and I could feel the presence hovering over us, growing stronger by the second. I don't like this, Mark whispered, finally drawing everyone's attention. He was leaning against the door, as if he had become a part of it. his expression completely terrified. "He's coming for me. I can feel it." "Mark, just breathe. We'll get out of here, okay?" I tried to move toward him, but the air was so heavy that each step felt like a battle. The atmosphere was thickening, and the sense that something terrible was about to happen made me uneasy. Then, a deafening noise echoed through the house, causing all of us to flinch. It was as if the house itself was screaming, and the lights flickered, plunging us into momentary darkness. When the lights came back on, a wave of panic hit me. Jake had disappeared. I looked at the others, my eyes widening in horror. "Jake, where are you?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the cold walls of the house. Emily was in shock, and Mark, now paler than ever, was frozen in place. "He can't have gone far," I said, trying to stay calm, but the truth was my heart was pounding, and the thought that Jake might be in danger was unbearable. "We need to find him," Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling. "He can't be far." "But what if Charlie took him?" Mark murmured, the terrifying thought taking shape in all of our minds. The possibility that the entity might have taken control of Jake was a reality none of us wanted to face. "Come on, we don't have time to waste," I said, trying to act like the leader I had always been, even though doubt and fear were eating me up inside. "We'll search for him together." We began wandering through the house, calling for Jake, but the only response was the echo of our own voices. Each empty room we passed felt like a reminder that we were trapped in a nightmare, and a chill ran down my spine at the thought of what might have happened to him. "Jake!" I shouted again, but the only thing that answered me was the oppressive silence of the house. Desperate, I knew we needed a plan, a way to bring Jake back. "We need to go back to the board. He might have left a clue." "Are you crazy? What if Charlie doesn't let him come back?" Mark protested, but the fear in his voice was unmistakable. I knew we were in uncharted territory, and with every passing second, the situation grew more desperate. "We have to take the risk, Mark. If we do nothing, we could lose him forever," I said, the determination in my voice sounding like our last hope as the echo of our calls for Jake faded into the shadows of the abandoned house. The search for Jake had turned into a nightmare. The silence of the abandoned house was deafening, broken only by the sound of our hesitant footsteps. The door to the room was locked, and my mind swirled with a whirlwind of thoughts. I approached the door, but something inside me told me this wasn't just an ordinary door. It was a barrier, a line between us and whatever was waiting on the other side. "Sarah, are you sure we should do this?" Mark asked, his voice trembling. He was visibly pale, the tension in his body palpable. The fear in his eyes mirrored my own. "We need to find Jake. He could be in danger," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, though doubt was creeping into my thoughts. Emily, standing behind me, seemed to absorb the energy around us. "Wait, I feel like something's wrong. We shouldn't go through with this," she said, her voice low but intense. I knew Emily had a connection to the supernatural, but the need to find Jake was stronger. "If we don't go now, it might be too late," Jake insisted, his bravery masking the fear that was also evident. The urge to confront Charlie, even if it meant opening a door to the unknown, drove us to act. With a push, the door swung open. Cold, heavy air hit us like a wave. What we found inside made my heart stop. Jake was sitting on the floor, his eyes glazed over, muttering incoherently. The scene was disturbing. He seemed so distant, like he was trapped in a deep nightmare. "Jake, what happened to you?" I called, my heart racing at the sight of his condition. He didn't react. He just kept muttering nonsense, repeating endlessly. "Charlie, he's here. He's coming. Jake, come back to us," Emily shouted, crouching down beside him, trying to shake him awake. But he didn't seem to hear us. It was as if a shadow had taken over him, and the reality around us was starting to become more distorted. "We need to do something. He can't stay like this," Mark said, his voice now full of desperation. He stepped back a little, as if Jake's presence terrified him even more. "Jake, listen. We're here to help you. Try to come back to us," I pleaded, but the only response we got was a blank, chilling stare. The atmosphere grew thicker, and with each passing second, the feeling that something evil was watching us intensified. Suddenly, Jake snapped awake with a scream, his body writhing as if he were fighting against invisible chains. I think I saw horrible things. He He's not just a game. He wants something from us. He was in a panic, and the room seemed to vibrate with the energy of his despair. Jake, calm down. What did you see? I asked, trying to get closer, but a wave of fear washed over me as I realized the environment around us was starting to change. The walls seemed to close in, and a low, almost inaudible whisper echoed, as if Charlie was manifesting, feeding off our fear. He showed me people, lost souls, Sarah. We're trapped here, and he won't let us leave. Jake screamed, his words echoing in my mind like a warning. I looked at Emily and Mark, and the expressions on their faces mirrored the same terror I was feeling. Reality was unraveling, and Charlie's shadow was becoming more than just an urban legend. It was turning into a palpable, menacing presence. We need to get out of here, now, I said, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The urge to escape became urgent. But how could we run from something that seemed to have complete control over us? What if we can't? What if he catches us? Mark muttered, his eyes lost between fear and despair. We can't give up, not now, I insisted, feeling that if we didn't act, we'd be the next ones to become part of Charlie's eternal game. The tension in the air was thick, and the fight for survival was just beginning. Whatever was lurking, we knew the real battle was about to start. The atmosphere in the abandoned house was heavier than ever. The air seemed to vibrate with a palpable tension, as if something evil was lurking, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. We need to end this, I said, my voice trembling with both determination and fear. I looked at my friends' faces, Sarah, Jake, and Emily, and saw the shock mirrored in their expressions. The last thing I wanted was for them to feel hopeless, but the truth was, we were in a desperate situation. So, what do you suggest, Sarah? Jake asked, forcing a smile, but the nervousness in his voice was unmistakable. He was trying to act like nothing was wrong, but we all knew we had crossed a line we couldn't ignore. We need to come together and say, Charlie, go away, I suggested, trying to sound more confident than I really felt. The idea of facing this entity seemed almost absurd, but it was the only hope we had. What if it makes things worse? Mark murmured, his eyes wide. He was clearly panicking, and his hesitation was contagious. We don't have another choice, Sarah insisted, her voice firm. If we don't try, we're not getting out of here. We all agreed. Even though deep down, I knew this decision could be our last. We gathered our strength, held hands, and began to chant the phrase, Charlie, go away. The first time we said it, nothing happened, but on the second attempt, a wave of energy rippled through the room. The lights started to flicker, and an invisible force pushed us back, as if a giant hand was trying to shove us away. No, this can't be happening, I screamed, trying to stay on my feet. The room was spinning, and the feeling of despair was starting to overwhelm my body. That's when Mark, his eyes wide with fear, started to speak, his trembling voice revealing a secret he had been hiding. My family, they have a history with this game. No one has ever escaped it. Everyone who played disappeared. His confession hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. What he was saying was terrifying, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. You're kidding, right? Jake asked, disbelief in his voice. But the look on Mark's face was serious, and that made us hesitate. What we were facing was bigger than any of us had imagined. That can't be true. We can beat this, I said, trying to muster up some courage. We're stronger together. We can't let this defeat us. The desperation in my voice was obvious, but I knew I had to motivate them. Charlie isn't just an urban legend. He's real, and he's manipulating us like puppets, Emily whispered, her frightened expression reflecting the pain we were all feeling. She was right. We were being pitted against each other, and the real battle wasn't just against the game. It was against our own fears. Determined to fight, we came together again and repeated the phrase, this time with more force. Charlie, go away. But this time, the response was fierce. A wave of energy hit us, as if the ground itself was opening beneath our feet. The house shook, and a deafening roar echoed from all corners. It was as if an explosion of energy had thrown us far away, and I found myself slammed against the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for a moment, everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, everything was a blur. I tried to stand, but the pain in my back was intense. What had happened? Where were my friends? Jake, Sarah, Emily? I called out, my voice echoing in the oppressive silence that now filled the room. There was no answer. Fear started spreading inside me. What had Charlie done to them? I was alone, and the sense of helplessness was overwhelming. The house, which once seemed like a place of fun, was now a nightmare maze, and I didn't know if I could find a way back. When we finally recovered from the explosion of energy, I realized something was terribly wrong. The walls around us were covered in scribbled words, some written in blood, others in a dark, viscous ink that seemed to move. The messages were terrifying, pleading for help and describing the anguish of other victims of Charlie. "Don't play again," one phrase warned, while another stated, "Only one can leave." My breathing grew heavy, and the reality of what we were facing began to sink into my mind. "This isn't possible," I murmured, looking around, trying to understand how we had been led to this twisted place. What was this house? What had Charlie done to us? "Sarah, are you seeing this?" Mark was next to me, his eyes wide with terror. Jake and Emily were further behind, and I could see the tension between us was rising. "Yes, I see it. We have to find a way out," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady, but doubt gnawed at me. How could we escape something that seemed to be manipulating our very reality? The air was heavy, and a cold chill began to seep into my bones. "Emily, do you feel anything? Any direction we should follow?" I asked, turning to her, who seemed to be in a trance, absorbing the energy around us. "Charlie is here. He's watching us," Emily replied, her voice low and trembling. "He's playing with our emotions. He wants us to feel fear, despair. That's how he feeds." Her words echoed in my mind, and I realized it was true. The game wasn't just an attempt at communication, it was a trap. We need to stick together then. "If we stay strong together, maybe we can break this cycle," Jake said, his determination clear in his words. But there was something about his gaze that worried me. He seemed different. A dark gleam reflected in his eyes, as if part of him was surrendering to the darkness. "That doesn't make sense. You're talking like you've already given up on us," I snapped at him. "We need to fight, not let him win." Suddenly, a shadow shifted behind us, and we all turned at once. A figure appeared, and my heart nearly stopped. It was Jake, but not the Jake we knew. His eyes were hollow, and a sinister smile spread across his face. "You don't get it, do you?" he spoke, his voice distorted and echoing, as if coming from somewhere far away. "I made a pact with Charlie. He promised me power, and now I'm part of him." "Jake, no," Emily screamed, but he stepped forward, and the house seemed to respond to him, the walls pulsating as if they were alive. "You can't escape. I'm the guardian now. If you want to leave, one of you has to stay." "Stay? You're saying one of us has to be sacrificed?" Mark stammered, his voice trembling with fear. "This is insane. We're friends." "Friends? That doesn't matter here. What matters is survival," Jake retorted, his smile widening. "Charlie doesn't just want to play. He wants to feed on pain, on sacrifice, and I am his choice." I looked at the desperate faces of my friends, each one grappling with the idea that the only way to escape might be through losing one of us. An unbearable pressure weighed down on us, a dilemma that seemed impossible to resolve. "Jake, you don't have to do this. We can find another way," I pleaded, feeling the crushing sense that everything was falling apart. But he just laughed, a laugh that echoed through the walls like a sinister reverberation. "There won't be another way, Sarah. This is what Charlie wants. Only one can leave, and he's already made his choice." Panic surged through me. I looked at each of my friends, trying to find an answer that didn't exist. The only thing I knew was that Charlie was enjoying our torment, and the house, with its walls covered in messages from other lost souls, reminded us that we were just another group of teenagers in a deadly game. The tension was so thick I could almost touch it. "Who will it be?" I asked softly, the question hanging in the air, a weight that threatened to crush us. The silence enveloped us, and the answer, though unspoken, was clear. Any one of us could be the chosen one. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like, comment, and share with someone who doesn't believe in this legend. See you in the next video.